Greetings. Happy, Thursday? Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. He is Aaron McIntyre, and we are brought to you by our good friends over at First Cup Coffee Company, the Patriot-owned, Christian-owned, patriotic coffee company with a flavor for every freedom-loving American. And if you would like to try them or try them again, go to firstcup.com, use the promo code DACE to get 10% off at firstcup.com, promo code DACE. And if you subscribe, you can also receive an additional 10% off for the life of your subscription at firstcup.com, promo code DACE. They put the roast date right there on every single bag. That way you know that it was shipped to you within days of being roasted at firstcup.com. Use the promo code DACE. Bottom of the hour, we're going to talk to somebody who's done some outstanding work, including a new book on the tranny madness issue. Next hour, why you should care about what happens to the Southern Baptist Convention, even if you're not one, even if you're a Catholic like Todd, even if you are, even if you're a Jew, you're irreligious but right wing. If you have any concern whatsoever about the future of American culture or the future of even having one, you should be concerned about what's happening with the Southern Baptist Convention. We'll get into that towards the bottom of next hour. Of course, we'll continue our line by line, verse by verse Theology Thursday series on Romans as well. In the overtime today, we'll do 3 non-political questions with my daughter Anastasia for subscribers at blazetv.com/Deace, where you can go to also become a subscriber if you would like. And so with all of that out of the way, and now that you are up to date, let's get going, as we always do, with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by The Chaos Blessedly Continues. Overnight at the University of California, Los Angeles, or UCLA, chaos did indeed continue on campus as law enforcement struggled to contain pro-Hamas orcs and communist revolutionary LARPers before riot police eventually broke through their encampment and made a series of arrests. Prior to last night's chaos, Fox News obtained a spreadsheet of demands that children made of their university, including hot food, gluten-free and vegan food, and demands that no sunscreen or bananas be brought into their encampment. I'm not making that up. Al Sharpton, your thoughts?
How do the Democrats, how do all of us on that side say January 6th was wrong if you can have the same pictures going on college campuses?
Good Lord, don't make a parallel with January 6th.
You lose the moral high ground.
That has happened, though.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is, wait till you see what happened in the summer of 2020, Al.
等你看看2020年夏天发生了什么。
The U.S. House of Representatives voted yesterday to pass the Bipartisan Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. The bill would mandate that when the Department of Education enforces federal anti-discrimination laws, it uses a definition of anti-Semitism put forward by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Problem is, as the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh points out, the legislation itself never says what the definition is of anti-Semitism at all. All it says is that the definition is whatever that aforementioned group says it is. The IHRA never precisely defines anti-Semitism, but it does cite examples such as, quote, claims the Jews killed Jesus. The bill also says it's anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli government as genocidal or racist, which most would obviously disagree with. But criticizing foreign governments is now considered anti-Semitic? That's the problem. Chip Roy, your thoughts?
But here's the thing. Yet again today on the floor of the House of Representatives, we had another show vote to make people feel good about themselves by passing a bill that says anti-Semitism in the title. That's what happened. And it was put on the floor by Republican leadership. And it was put on the floor by Republican leadership despite knowing that it was pulled from going through committee. We didn't have a chance to amend it. We didn't have a chance to discuss it, to debate it. We didn't have a hearing on it. It was jammed through to take advantage of this political moment while all of these horrific things are going around the country. Republican leadership wanted to score political points, so they moved through legislation without the kind of deliberation, debate that is supposed to be carried out by the people in this chamber.
Moving on, the notorious horse doctor of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, made an appearance on Fox Business to take a victory lap on what he believes his company accomplished with COVID.
Moving ahead,
for us, it's just continue executing in the 5 things that we are going to make the difference this year. Seeds and acquisition and oncology, it is our new COVID. So we did what we did with COVID. We are very proud. We saved the world, but it is behind us now. We want to do once more, and I think oncology is our best chance to do it. But
oncology.
An Iowa judge denied a motion to dismiss hate crime charges filed against Michael Cassidy, the conservative Christian veteran who tore down a satanic altar erected at the Iowa Capitol, meaning he still faces as many as 5 years in prison. Davis Yountz, attorney who represents Cassidy, said in remarks to The Sentinel that the legal team is, quote, deeply disappointed with the ruling against the motion, which contended that the Satanic Temple of Iowa is neither a person or a legitimate religion under Iowa law. The U.S. Supreme Court this week let Texas keep imposing age verification requirements on porn sites, rejecting a challenge by an industry-led group, arguing the new law violates the constitutional rights of adults. The order, which came without explanation or any public dissent, leaves in force a measure that's already forced one of the biggest sites, Pornhub, to shut down in Texas, allegedly. The opponents sought to halt the law while the high court decides whether to hear their appeal. Kansas lawmakers have voted to override multiple vetoes of pro-life measures by Democrat Governor Laura Kelly in the current session, ensuring measures supporting the providers of abortion alternatives like adoption, punishing those who coerce women into abortions, and improving the state gathering of abortion data will become law after all. And finally, this from the Babylon Bee. Elon Omer says anti-Semitism wouldn't be a problem if we got rid of all the Jews. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage is brought to you by our friends over at Birch Gold. Can your savings weather the current and forthcoming economic storm? Think about what you put away for the future. Inflation can render cash worthless. Real estate can crash like in 2008. Economies built on a mountain of debt can fall like a house of cards. It's a good thing we don't have to be concerned about any of this. There are very few physical assets you can invest in that can stand the test of time. Gold is one of them. It has withstood as a valued form of money for millennia. It's why people are flocking to it right now and why Birch Gold is busier than ever. Through a little-known tax loophole, which, they'll try to close, so take advantage of it now, Birch Gold lets you convert a retirement account into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, and the best part is it won't cost you anything at all out of pocket. To learn more, text Steve to 989-898. Claim your free info kit on gold. Text Steve to 989-898 and secure your savings today. Text Steve to 989-898. I want to give you just a little bit of what my last, 36 hours has been like, because it'll kind of set up for you what you're about to hear. But, sometimes you'll watch an episode of your favorite show and it'll start at the end before you kind of know the rest of the story. They'll show you the end and then they'll backtrack of how we got to that ending. You've seen episodes like that before, right?
Some of the best, yeah.
Yeah, some of the best for sure. We'll see if that applies to this one. But let me start at the end. Received this note from Melissa shortly before we went on the air this morning. And she said, I'm not sure if you saw this or not, but there is something even darker than obsidian black, which I believe is the current. Is it obsidian black or the Einstein Rosencrantz bridge black? Somewhere in there is our current status of pilled here on the show. Somewhere in there, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Melissa says there is the actual blackest you can be is Vanta black.
What's the spelling of that?
Vanta.
Okay.
Yeah, Vanta black is a substance made of vertically aligned carbon nanotube arrays. It is the blackest artificial substance known. It absorbs up to 99.96% of the radiation on the visible color spectrum. So it's not just a standalone color in and of itself, but it absorbs and overcomes all of the other vibrant colors itself. And, it's 99.965% effective, like the horse doctor's vaccine supposedly was, right? A little bit like that, right? So that's where I'm at right now. That's the end of the story. Now let's go to the beginning and show you how I got to the place that someone telling me about something I previously didn't know, Vanta black, I found oddly encouraging. How did we get here? These are my last 36 hours. I want to introduce you to two people in the state of Arizona. if you don't mind. I want you to meet Shauna Bullock, Bolick. Shauna Bullock is one. Shauna Bullock has on her website, if you go there, Bullock for Arizona, BOLICKFOR, BullockForArizona.com. She has on her website, and I quote, one of my main priorities is protecting the sanctity of human life. That's right there on Shauna Bullock's website. I also want to introduce you to another individual, though. TJ Shope is another legislator in the state of Arizona. TJ Shope, SHOP. TJShope.com is where you can go. Okay. And on his website, it says, quote, I've always protected life and stood up for family values. That sounds pretty cool, right?
Sure.
That sounds good. Yeah. TJ Shope and Shauna Bullock were the deciding votes in overriding Arizona's pro-life law from 1864 that went into effect as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, and then was just upheld by the state Supreme Court. They were the two deciding votes to repeal it. Main priorities is protecting the sanctity of human life. Shauna Bullock, Mr. I've always protected life and stood up for family values, Mr. Shope. I'm sure they'll campaign this fall on knowing what a woman is, knowing what a border is. But they're just self-identifying being pro-life. They're redefining what pro-life means, right? So my last 36 hours started with learning about these two Judases. We started with that. Okay. And then it continued. I saw a Rasmussen poll that showed Mike Johnson's popularity has gone up 5 points in the last month, and that he's the most popular Republican speaker of like the last 20 years. But what you're going to really love about that is when you read the Rasmussen poll's release on this, when you read the release, it tells you right in the release. His popularity is largely driven by two people. Boomers. In other words, folks who just are watching Fox News all day. Boomers. The elderly. And you're going to love this. I mean, you're going to love this one. This one's going to flop your socks. Brace yourself. Government workers. Because that's what we all want. A Republican popular with government workers. In fact, his approval rating amongst government employees is 13 points higher than it is among people who actually have a real job. Now, that's not to say if you have a government job like cop, fireman, you don't have a real job, but you don't. Your job's a subsidy. It economically doesn't exist. That's why we should limit these jobs, because government doesn't have any money. It just takes money from other people. That doesn't mean, by the way, that your job isn't a necessity in terms of a service. But economically speaking, your job doesn't exist in the traditional understanding of economics, meaning there was a need for something and the marketplace understood, and therefore entrepreneurs raised the capital to fill that need, and then people acquiring that service or product then allow them to profit off of filling that need. You know, the normal market economic process for job creation and growth, right? Sure. Your job may be essential. If you're a soldier, your job is essential. If you're a cop or fireman, your job's essential. You guys, by the way, are also a scant percentage of the government overall workers. Okay. This would be teachers, everybody. All of these are not jobs in the normal sense of the word. They're subsidies. Every single one of them is a subsidy. None of you are paying for yourselves. You're all subsidies. Some of you are necessary. Most of you aren't. But all of you are subsidies. So his approval rating is 13 points higher with people who work off the government than people who don't. I wonder why that would be. Because that's what we all want. That's a biblical worldview. That's a biblical worldview. Is we promote policies that AFSCME and the NEA find more approving of people who like own their own small office cleaning business or mow lawns for a living and have employees. That's a biblical worldview right there, right?
Yep.
So that was strike two. Last night I come home from small group. I get a text from Chip Roy, and it is the internal makeup of this anti-Semitism bill. And in the text he sends me, he circles point number 9, which, I mean, literally, you could, at this point, the gospel is anti-Semitic. The New Testament now is anti-Semitic. I mean, if you cite, it literally says, define what it means that the Jews killed Jesus. Now, theologically, we killed Jesus. He's up on the cross for the sins of the world, okay? But keep in mind, we're dealing with, groups like the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Baptist Poverty Law Center, right? Or Southern Baptist, I'm sorry. Well, that was a Freudian slip. The Southern Baptist is almost to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Not quite there yet, but on their way, which we'll talk about later in the show. Am I Vanta Black yet?
We're getting there.
I'm getting there.
And it's good.
And I'm at the point where I just said next exit Vanta Black, and I've really got to pee, so I'm punching it right now. Okay, all right. So we're going to have, and of course, your non-government organizations that are going to oversee this anti-Semitism bill, they're not going to be getting their recommendations on what is or what is anti-Semitic from the scriptures, from the Blaze, from anybody. They'll be getting other than the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, right? Y'all remember when the Anti-Defamation League tried to shut down Mel Gibson's The Passion because it was anti-Semitic? The portrayal of the gospel of a Jewish Messiah was anti-Semitic. I'm sure nothing could possibly go wrong with handing over biblical interpretation of blasphemy over to the feds. Except this is pretty obvious where this was going to go, because as I'm at the gym yesterday, this is what Fox News was promoting. So clearly the talking point had gone out. This was the Fox News Republican boomer solution. They even brought a Democrat on to say, see, this is a bipartisan pace of legislation. Okay, so yeah. So that was very clear. The talking point had gone out. We're not going to actually uphold the laws of punishing the conduct and behavior of any of these infidels. No, we're just going to create new infidels. And you are the new infidels. We're going to actually, Republicans are not Republicans are actually first of all going to get in the way of an internecine feud among the Democratic base, Nazis versus Marxists. They're going to get in the middle of it rather than just getting out of the way. I think you guys should fight. Go for it. That's what they should be doing. We did that show a couple days ago, right? That's what they should do. No, they're actually going to get in the middle of it. But what they're going to do is they're actually going to sign off on legislation that will then let the devil come after their own Christian base. They're going to do that now. That's going to be the solution. That's a biblical worldview, of course. That's a biblical worldview, giving government the power to say the Bible is illegal. That's Mike Johnson's biblical worldview shining through once again. So I got that last night. This morning I get to Isaiah in my Bible reading first thing in the morning. I'm doing that whole Bible in a year thing again.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we're not to the good parts yet, like the stuff that Christmas songs are based on. We're to the parts that the shame-based Catholic over here is quoting all the time. Right? Everybody's getting creamed, smeared, vinegar, judged, called out.
Vinegar straight up.
Yeah, it is, man. And it's 6 a.m. too. And I haven't even checked my metabolism and my lumen yet, which we'll be telling you about those in the future here soon. This is 6 a.m., man. And Isaiah is just, we're bypassing veins and we're opening capillaries, just bleeding out, literally. And so I'm reading this and I just hear in the spirit, I'm like, what are we doing? What is this? What are we doing here? The anti-Semitism bill last night, I had a hard time getting to sleep after Chip texted me, man. I could not wind down. I was about to Google how much melatonin can I take in a night and actually be able to wake up the next morning. Okay, I mean, there's moments in life, and there's moments in a given situation where you think you're really committed to something. And you're frustrated. Like, I think you could hear my frustration in my voice a couple of days ago here on the show. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you can raise your voice and get worked up, and that's not always wrong. If anything, we need more of that in our culture today. But a lot of times that does come from a place of frustration, right? And then you reach a point where things just continue to get piled on. And you're just at this point, you're like, what are we doing? What is this? Why am I taking part in this, like, on any level? What am I doing here? Why am I wasting my time with this? And I reached that point this morning. It's May 2nd. The Republicans in Washington have done nothing constructive with the power we've given them. They instead have taken care of foreign countries before our own. The Republican speaker is at best a more likable version of Mike Pence, and at worst, things I frankly don't want to contemplate, all under the banner of a biblical worldview, and yet his approval rating is going up while he is betraying every fundamental belief and creed of the country. They even funded the corrupt FISA program. We spent 3 years going through some shoehorned, de facto, ham-fisted coup over that. And the Republican presidential candidate was even passively aggressive, okay with keeping it going. Yeah, do what you want. It's just, nothing matters. When we created grunge when we were kids, our generation, I don't think we understood this was prophecy. Black Hole Sun is prophecy. We read The Room right in 1993. We read it right. We knew that we were likely to inherit nothing or never given a chance to. While the other previous generation pursued their aspirational counterculture utopian goals, I'm supposed to sign off on Mick Jagger preparing for a tour at 85 while his granddaughter watches. No, I'm not. Kristi Noem, go look at pictures of what she looked like 5 years ago compared to now. What is that? And that's our generation too. I guess that's learned behavior. No 50-year-old woman needs to do that. Be more comfortable in your own skin. Be a wife, a mom, a grandma. Stop it. Stop. Get off of Fox News. They're still trying to resurrect her, and she won't take yes for an answer. I'm just, I'm not even mad now. I'm beyond mad. I'm just done. I'm just done. So I have, until something drastic changes, it should be the most important election of my lifetime for the first time. It should be. It's not. It's not. So until those who are actually involved in it act and behave otherwise, I'm just out. I don't care. I'm just done. I'm just out. I can't justify this anymore. I just can't. You do whatever you want. You follow it every single day if you want. I don't care. But that's a you thing. YOLO, cool. I mean, we're going to lean even more into biblical worldview here. I'm not even going to consider analyzing things as it pertains to an election outcome. Don't even care. I'm literally playing. I'm putting on a proverbial referee uniform with a biblical worldview. I'm going to tell you what I think the Word of God has to say about an issue. You check as a good Berean whether I'm telling you what I'm saying about the Word of God is aligns with it or not. You do that. Okay, hold me accountable to that. And then if it doesn't fit the outcome of whatever narrative that you want and you're mentally masturbating to, that's not my problem, man. That's up to you, and you figure that out. I'm done. We're practically done and on our own anyway, with very few limited exceptions. We're politically on our own anyway. So everybody just, we're going full Fleetwood Mac here. We're going our own way. You do you. You can be as absorbed and involved in it as you want. Not, I'm just done. And I reached that point this morning. I just realized I can't do this anymore. I can't. Now, I can't sit here and say, guys, we have to win this election because we have to vote into power the people that just handed hell the ability in the not too distant future to use the federal government to prosecute the preaching of the Bible. I can't do that. I don't know what to say. I don't know. And I know some of you will ironically be mad at me that I won't continue helping them patronize and condescend you. And I get that. I've been where you are. I know what that's like. My mom and I used to go back and forth. My mom wanted to leave Dave, and then I talk her out of it, and then I wanted to leave, and then she talked me out of it. I entirely know what that codependency relationship is like when you're being abused. I lived it. I grew up with it. So I'm not even mad at you for that. I'm sympathetic to it because I've walked more than a mile in those shoes. It was called my childhood, so I get that too. But from this time forward, until something dramatic changes, and all three of us would have to agree something dramatic has changed. Fair? It has to be unanimous. From this time forward, it's May 2nd. Until that happens, Todd, that air gun, this is my consent. If there are any attorneys, prosecutors, I want to witness this. I'm doing this of my own free will right here on the air live. Until something we all agree dramatic has changed, if I attempt any whatsoever to have any aspirational analysis, hope, thought, or observation about the necessity of winning this election, Todd, this is my verbal consent and a record of it, Aaron, record it. Pick up that air gun and shoot me in the face. And I'm not joking.
I'm old enough to remember, if I may interject this. You squirmed a little bit the first time Todd said this might be the least important election of our lifetime.
Yeah. The only meaningful policy argument this party has had in the last 6 weeks was arguing with us about how many more babies will you guys let us kill. I don't know what to do with that. You tell me, by all means, Pastor so-and-so, Minister so-and-so, Deacon so-and-so, Elder so-and-so, Father so-and-so, seasoned saint so-and-so, you tell me what I am supposed to do with how we need to kill more kids and we can completely, God will overlook all of our national sins as long as we make sure Israel has the latest updated weapon systems with money we don't even have. I don't know what to do with that. And so you know what I'm going to do with it? Nothing.
You didn't even mention, so far we're preserving the right of worshiping the demon at the Iowa State Capitol, so...
And now we're going to hand over the opportunity for Biden NGOs to agree with the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League that preaching texts out of the New Testament is anti-Semitic. That's it. I'm done. I don't know what else to do. I tried, man. I did everything I could. I cost myself friends, business, everything I could to not get to this point, and it didn't work out. And I wish it would have been different. And I just don't know what to do with this anymore. And I'm just out. And I can't expend any more energy on this. Because it's clear this is casting pearls unto swine, and I just have to move on with my life and redeem the time, for the days are evil. I am done until they change my mind, and that's their job, not mine. It's theirs. I got other mission fields, other rows to plow, and that's what I'm going to do.
You're in a good place. I mean, 2022 was the most important election of our lifetime. I thought so before the results came out. It was even more important, I thought, because of those results. We want the bread and the circuses, and that's it. Look at Borla, just pulling down a zipper and peeing in your face.
With Fox News giving him the platform to do it, of course.
They love it. Yeah. No one's pulling back on this. Get us more, Barabbas.
I bring you glad tidings of great joy. I have the whole... what are we doing here moment every time, every day, multiple times a day while I'm editing the montage. The 30th, which was Tuesday, I had that 3 times. Yesterday, I had that 2 times. And then today, basically every story was, what the hell are we doing here?
I don't know the answer. So therefore, I can't do it anymore. So hardcore, 100% biblical worldview, whether that gets you the outcome you want or not my problem, not my fault. We're moving on. about to talk to Mary Margaret Olohan about her outstanding book on what's going on with tranny madness, but I know a lot of you are concerned. One school year is coming to an end, and maybe you made it, but another one beckons here in the not too distant future. And at this point, in a lot of places, particularly if you're in a blue state, you send your kid to a government school, it is Russian roulette. Or as Todd likes to make a note, the red bandana scene at the Deer Hunter, which is Russian roulette. That's essentially what it is. I mean, any day is the day your kid could come home and convince their guidance counselor that they're the wrong gender and you must comply. Well, FPA wants to be a solution to help save your family from a tragedy that all too many American families are suffering through or in danger of on a daily basis. This is an outstanding educational alternative. If you've been thinking about homeschooling, but you're like, do I have the time? Am I qualified to do it? Am I wired to do it? I mean, we've homeschooled our kids, but it's not easy. I'm not going to sit. I love it. I think it's a great way to do the right thing. But I can't sit here and say, though, that it's easy and it was ideal and everything looked like, a Little House on the Prairie episode every single day. It didn't. Okay. So if you're looking for an option, it could be Freedom Project Academy. We had our son Noah enrolled in FPA for a couple of years before we started talking about him because I wanted to see, for myself how good at this they were. I mean, I knew the people who founded this school because I had fought alongside Dr. Duke Pesta and others during the Common Core battles back in the day. So I was optimistic, but I wanted to see for myself. And if I'm willing to put my own kid in here for not 1 year but 2, then I'm willing to recommend that you do the same with yours. The only reason Noah didn't finish there, he just wanted to go play football and get involved in stuff after school. And so we sent him to Des Moines Christian for that. Otherwise, he would have gone through FPA the whole way through. If you want to get a free information packet, find out about their classical curriculum, Judeo-Christian basis, critical thinking encouraged, and also rewarded and incentivized, go to freedomforschool.com, FOR, freedomforschool.com. Their spots fill up fast every fall. All right. So don't hesitate. Go to freedomforschool.com. Well, speaking of that aforementioned book, it is called Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult, from Mary Margaret Olohan from the Daily Signal with the Heritage Foundation. Mary, it is good to have you with us here on The Blaze. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I love the fact that you use the term cult in your title because we are dealing here with a false religious level of conviction, cognitive dissonance, things of that nature. All the hallmarks of a cult are there. So let's actually start there. And I mean, my audience knows why I use the term a lot and I explain it, but why in this case, in the title of your book, did you choose to use it?
I used it because of the many, like you were saying, religious seeming ideological aspects of this phenomenon. So, first of all, we have these kids who are being told by people online, by therapists, by teachers, that the reason that they're not happy is because they're in the wrong body. And all of this is hinging on this idea of seeking happiness, right? So we have these cult-like members who are telling them, oh, you will be happy if you pursue hormones, surgeries, surgical procedures, all of this, a long, expensive lifestyle of changing who you are, which we know to be impossible. And when they're going through these rituals, or you could call them, to become a different gender, they're also being told by doctors, their parents are being told by doctors, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? And then when they finally go to the doctors and say, I think I regret this transition, I think that this was not good for me, the doctors tell them this is all part of your gender journey. And so, all of these different factors of the way that they are talked to, of the way they're led down this path, of the way that they're gaslit, and the way the trans community embraces and loves bombs them while they're believing that they're transgender, and then the way that the trans community just absolutely discards them once they admit that they had gone down the wrong path and that they could not actually surgically or hormonally transition. The way that they are treated is so disturbingly hostile and angry that in the end of the day, it really resembles a cult. And I think, I actually asked a bunch of the detransitioners in my book, are you okay with this title? Because I wanted to make sure they didn't think it was too incendiary. And they said that they agreed that, it did feel like a cult. And so they think that it was an acceptable word choice.
I don't know how old you are, and since I'm a gentleman, I won't ask. Okay, but I'm going on 51, and what you've described, I have seen before. As I was coming of age politically and considering the issues of the age in the late 80s, early 90s, the exact same thing I saw on abortion. All right, I'm pro-choice unless you choose life, and then you're a bigot, don't you know? Okay. Then as I got into conservative media, and then I became a Christian right around the exact same time. And I become fascinated with stories because before I became a Christian, I thought sexuality was immutable and people were quote unquote born that way. Well, now I'm seeing all these stories of people that are claiming, hey, you know, my worldview changed, I had a spiritual renewal, conversion, and suddenly my desires changed and I don't desire those anymore. And really I want to have a relationship with somebody in the opposite gender and a family now. And so I started interviewing these people, listening to their stories, and I had no idea what I was really walking into. I'm really new at this, and suddenly I'm getting alerts that I'm on every hate group lists of future hate mongers for the feds to monitor, because again, we're all for sexual diversity unless the diversity you choose is etched in some form of traditional Judeo-Christian Western moral ethos, right? All right. What you're describing is very similar, the exact same thing, and it's probably because this all stems from largely the exact same worldview.
It is definitely a far more pagan worldview, and I think we could have a whole separate conversation about where it's coming from and who is pushing this on people. At this point, it's very fair to say that a lot of this is stemming from social media, and that's where most of the detransitioners who are in my book first stumbled onto any of this, as they were encountering it online. The girls were largely finding this content on Instagram, which I think a lot of us in the political space don't understand Instagram the way we should. It's just this death trap for all these girls, especially who are coming into this space and they're seeing all these very, very, very unattainable photos of women and womanhood. You know, the type of photos where the woman is perfectly molded, perfectly sculpted. She can go on these exotic vacations. She gets tons of male validation. And so all these girls are thinking, that's what I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm supposed to look like. And then they're also being exposed to a lot of really hardcore pornography, since we know that it's so hard to avoid that on the internet these days. And so many young people are exposed to it at early ages. And so I think we should think about that combination, because these detransitioners, especially the girls, are telling me that, yes, they were exposed to pornography at early ages. And that combined with what they understood womanhood to be scared them. They didn't want to be that perfect, sexy woman who also they're seeing in pornography, degraded and humiliated. And they're thinking, A, I don't know how to be that perfect woman, and B, I'm scared to be her because look at how she's treated in pornography. And then when they're online and they're seeing all this pro-trans content and they're being told, oh, you don't feel like you fit into that image of a woman? Well, probably because you're a guy. And that is a very disturbing little pitfall that a lot of these girls told me they fell into, and maybe not the exact route that I'm explaining, but it is pretty common experience for young girls to have on social media, and to begin wondering if they don't fit into that mold because they're an awkward teenager developing into a woman and not understanding what femininity and womanhood is except for these social media images. So that was something I found really interesting as I was exploring this book and talking to these detransitioners. And I think it's a cultural phenomenon that we need to figure out how to address is how do we teach our young people what masculinity and femininity is, and in what context can we bring back good ideas of these things, which frankly, both masculinity and femininity have been demonized by the left. So it's no wonder that we've gotten to the point that we are at today.
That is an excellent point. I mean, on the flip side, for the boys, I wonder how many boys have went out and sought after castration because they noticed another dude's nakedness in gym class or after some sports practice. And we all did as guys, but in different eras, you wouldn't dare say anything about that out loud because it wasn't encouraged. Nowadays, and you just would move on. Hey, I noticed it. It's a phase, and I just moved on with my life. It doesn't mean that I'm in the wrong body or I'm gay. It just means that I'm wondering I'm how people are changing and how that compares to me. Well, nowadays I jump on TikTok and I make a video about it. Hey, I noticed another boy's nakedness in gym class, and all the comments in my TikTok tell me I'm gay, or maybe I'm I'm a woman in a man's body. And so if I push back on that, all those exact same commenters in my TikTok feed, which are largely my peer group now, and where I go for affirmation and support, they will now all turn on me as some form of a bigot. And so that's where the momentum starts, right? Next thing I know, I'm in the guidance counselor's office. They're watering that seed, and sooner or later that boulder is running downhill, and it's too late for anybody to put a stop to it. And if I had a real dad who would put a stop to it, this process wouldn't have begun in the first place, which is exactly why I'm here. And next thing I know, I've got a robe on and I'm taking hormone treatments and figuring out how to bind down my pubescent package. How accurate is that story for how a lot of this ends up the way that it does?
Well, I know Abel Garcia, for example, he's one of the detransitioners in my book. Abel told me that he actually grew up in a Hispanic family. It was a migrant family, and he was living in, I believe, Southern California. And he was really disconcerted because he felt like he didn't match up to the images of masculinity in his family. Everyone in his family was super macho, and he felt like he was not. He said he was a little overweight, and he wasn't as macho as the rest of the men in his family, including his brothers or his dad. And so that got him thinking at a young age, well, maybe I'm not a guy, maybe I'm actually a girl. And so that's an interesting route that Abel went down, where he was wondering about whether or not he was a man because he felt like he didn't measure up to masculine versions in his life.
I love the tack that you take of letting people's personal stories do the heavy lifting here. Because the eyewitness testimony, in the Western tradition, that's the most sacred form of testimony, right? Going back to the biblical tradition, in some cases, you couldn't exercise the death penalty for certain offenses without an eyewitness testimony. So it's long been given the gold standard of testimony and testimonial in our culture. A lot of times, the other side just uses it for emotional manipulation. I love the fact that you've turned the tables here and said, all right, you want to play the testimony game? We've got some counter testimonies here now that you have to wrestle with.
I mean, that's what I do for my job every day. I write stories, and I tell the stories that aren't being told. I have a friend who I used to work with at the Daily Caller who told me a long time ago, I said, what's the point? Like, what are we supposed to be doing here? And he said, we exist to fill the void that the mainstream media leaves. And so at the Caller, that's what I was doing with other reporters there. And that's what I've been trying to do at different outlets ever since, is, fill that gap that other people leave with the stories that aren't being told. And so with this book, my hope was to, like you're saying, tell these stories in a way that a random person at the bookstore can pick up my book, and maybe they're pro-trans ideology, maybe they have a trans sibling or something, but they're curious and they can read it and hear these people's stories and think, okay, I don't identify as conservative necessarily, but I do not want this kind of thing to happen to a child. This is wrong based on these stories. I don't want that to happen to anyone. And I left the commentating largely to the people who are smarter than me that can write the commentary books on this, like Ryan Anderson and Abigail Schreier. But this book is the stories of detransitioners. And I think that they are one of the most powerful witnesses to this fight against gender ideology, because they are the victims, but they're also the warriors. They're the ones filing lawsuits right now. They're the ones that are going to turn the tables on this whole industry. So I think they're incredibly brave, and I'm really grateful to them for speaking to me and for letting me give them a platform through my book.
Agreed. And it's well done, and it's an excellent and effective argumentative tactic. So I'm glad you picked up on it. They're the missing link to the story that people need to hear. So we're not just dealing here with ideological propositions and statistics, but what are we doing to actual real people who have names, have souls, have families, had futures? It's called Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. Mary Margaret Olohan from the Daily Signal. It's been a pleasure, Mary, and thank you for an outstanding work. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. Take care. And this really dovetails well with my latest column over at The Blaze, by the way, which is about a young girl here locally, in fact, who was heading right down the road that Mary Margaret just was quantifying for us as kind of the basis for many of the stories in her book. She was heading right down that road, and next thing you know, she has a prophetic moment in spiritually. And just turns around and walks away. And now she's at that exact same school where she was being honored and celebrated for contemplating this madness. And now she is standing in the gap against that madness to the exact same fellow students. And even though they hate her for it. Because again, it's not about diversity, it's about conformity. It is about you make the choice we want you to make. Otherwise, you're going to find out real quick that every time you turn on a Tolerance Boulevard, it's a one-way street.
Yeah, this is when it came up yesterday in the questions from the audience about buy, sell, hold, and about the diversity as our strength. What you just said is exactly what I meant when I pushed back on it. That's just a means to an end. They have their own version. Just like the White Witch, when she thought she had killed Aslan, went into the war wearing the remnants of his mane. These people, when they hear every knee shall bend, they are so jealous of that. They plan on making you kneel. You know this by now, don't you? Mm-hmm. They will do it, unless you make some different choices.
That's well said, Todd. And I just want to say and add this. You mentioned she writes for the Daily Signal, and for a number of years now, I would say Mary Margaret Olohan, even outside of this book, although she writes about some of the same issues that she covers in this book, she is one of the best storyteller journalists we have on the right now. And you should really check out the rest of her work, again, outside of this book. It's really exceptional. Really great storytelling, really great journalism, as she mentioned there, trying to tell the stories that need to be told but aren't. And so she's really an asset to not just the cause of sanity, but the cause of the good, the true, and the beautiful.
It's also why one of my number one encouragements when I go around the country speaking to pastors or our people, our kinds of politicians, etc., and even just parents, we need to be more open and forthcoming about our own stories and our own testimonies, so that we can have people empathize the other way too, and see that there's a way out. You don't have to take these lies to their most destructive conclusions. We wrestled with some of these exact same lies. And we took the narrow road and ended up where we are instead. And I think that testimony game works both ways. More in a moment. Back here with Hour 2 here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace, he's Todd Erzen, he's Aaron McIntyre. And you can let us know who you are and what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing the show. That is steve@stevedeace.com. DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you listen to the podcast, please, we would ask you to do two things for us. Leave us a 5-star review if you like us. Thanks to you who have done that already. And hit subscribe, or in the case of iTunes, follow. And that way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your podcast feed every single time. And thank you to all of you that have done that for us as well. Thank you to our friends over at America's Christian Credit Union. They are sponsoring this week's Theology Thursday, and they're doing so because they know that there used to be a time when financial institutions had respect for the values of their customers and the communities that they were serving. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. Thankfully, though, there is another option of a company, a financial institution, that does still do that. It's called America's Christian Credit Union. It's the #1 banking institution on Public Square. It provides a full suite of financial services to God-fearing Americans just like you. But here's the thing. It's not some new thing. It's been doing so for 65 years. So it stood the test of time for families, ministries, and businesses across the country to ditch the big banks and choose ACCU as your trusted financial partner instead. They've got 35,000 branches and ATMs nationwide. You don't have to keep doing business with a financial institution who is completely sold out to the spirit of the age. If you don't want to, make the switch today to America's Christian Credit Union. Start doing business with these people instead. Find America's Christian Credit Union online at americaschristiancu.com/switch. That's americaschristiancu.com/switch. And America's Christian Credit Union is federally insured by the National Credit Union Administration. So let's get back to our Theology Thursday series, looking at the book of Romans. We're going through it verse by verse. We left off, Aaron, you've been gone for the last 2 weeks. Last week we did questions from the audience. We got up to verse 8 2 weeks ago, and that's where we pick up now today. So we're still in chapter 1, verse 8. Paul is still going through some of his introductions to the audience that he's writing to. And he writes, "First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I mention you, always in my prayers, asking that somehow by God's will I may now at last succeed in coming to you." So talking about these verses, Charles Spurgeon, he writes, God has beloved ones in the darkest places of the earth. There is all the more reason for them to be saints, because they're surrounded by sinners. They must have had true faith, or they could not have confessed Christ between the jaws of a lion, for they lived in Rome with Nero hunting after Christians as if they'd been wild beasts, and yet they were not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. And this man Paul did a great deal by prayer. I remember a minister who is now with the Lord, who was thanked by his people for his wonderful sermons, but he said to them, "You never thanked me for my prayers, yet they were the best part of my service to you." When men of God are mighty in prayer, we owe much to them. I'll stop there and before we get to verse 10. That's what Charles Spurgeon says about verses 8 or 9. Aaron, since it's been a couple weeks since we've heard from you, we'll let you go next.
Yeah, so just going through here quickly, a lot of things to say as always about this. I thank God through the Lord Jesus Christ. Paul uses, this is again, the righteous shall live by faith by R.C. Sproul's commentary of Romans. Paul's using the word thanks there, Eucharisto, the church term for the Eucharist, or the word that we get the term Eucharist for, the celebration of the Lord's Supper. That's the term he's using there. Paul conjoins the word universe and cosmos to say that the Roman Christians' reputation for their faith has been broadcast throughout the cosmos or the universe, although he's expressing joy in this instance. When first century people spoke of the world, they were meaning of the known world or the Mediterranean world. Paul's expressing joy. People throughout the Mediterranean world are talking about the faith of the Roman Christians and that they were making an impact. R.C. Sproul has a lot to say about taking an oath, as Paul does here. For God is my witness in verse 9. Bible shows us, Sproul contends, there are actually appropriate times for taking oaths. Some people point to Matthew 5 and James 5 as contrary evidences for that. And then finally, I thought this was interesting when in verses 9 and 10, I know you didn't get to 10, but in verses 9 and 10, Paul is making note of his supplication that he makes request if by some means now at last I may find a way into the will of God to come to you in Rome. Little did he know he would find that way. It just would be in chains as a prisoner of the Roman government.
It's interesting that Sproul says that, because Spurgeon makes the same observation about verse 10. He says, I suppose that Paul never thought that he would finally get to Rome at the expense of the government with an imperial guard taking care of him against his own will the whole way. All right.
Perspective.
So, hey, I mean, God honored his prayer. He answered his prayer, probably not just in the way that maybe Paul was hoping at the time or assuming. Indeed. I'm sorry, Todd.
Well, remembering once again that banger of an introduction. Remember that everything we went through verses 1 through 7 that we'd done, it wasn't just like, hey dudes, I'm Paul, nice to know you. No, I mean, power, authority, demanding obedience, historical precedent in Scripture, the new authority of the Holy Spirit. I mean, 7 verses. That's why it took us 3 weeks. I mean, it's all there. Well, when he talks about God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in proclaiming the gospel of his Son, from Scott Hahn, I found this interesting. He says, the language that Paul uses to describe his service to God is distinctively cultic. The verb serve, the Greek latro, frequently appears in Scripture to designate the service of divine worship. Matthew, Hebrews, Revelations, he refers to verses there. So for the apostle, and we've been talking about what apostolic authority means, serving Christ through prayer and proclaiming the gospel is a liturgy in which he plays the role of a priest offering the faithful to God.
And we did an entire episode about this. We've done 2, because much of the Q&A, once a month Q&A from the audience, or the audience feedback that we did last week, was on this very question again. So I'm not going to bring this up to open this can of worms all over again, but just to reiterate, this is where the other side of the argument would say, yes, we believe that is what Paul meant, but it applied to the authority given to Paul in his era, not necessarily to Pastor Dale, who's got a very faithful church in Schenectady. But that's the other side of the argument, essentially.
I think the interesting here, we were arguing mostly along general authoritative terms. Now here, we have a specific application, and not only that, and as I've said before, it's important to stress, we're obviously going to disagree about that, but the common lament amongst Protestants, well, I just don't find that in my Bible. Right there, there's 3 verses about this specifically. So usually a more honest argument is that I think you're misinterpreting those, not that it's not there.
That's a perfectly fair point. And by the way, I'm not... Aaron, would you consider yourself a cessationist? You're probably the closest to one here amongst the 3 of us. Fair?
Depends on what the definition of the word is.
That's true too. That's the other thing too. We could chase these rabbit trails. We could...
Generally speaking, as it's understood, as charismatic gifts are understood culturally, or at least within the church, contemporarily, I should say, I would probably be considered a cessationist.
Okay. I'm not, but I am very sympathetic to many of the arguments cessationists make against charismatics, as I've said before, because a lot of what gets displayed as charismaticism is just utter foolishness, frankly, and should be rebuked. And there needs to be more
and I want to say
inner policing of that within the charismatic movement, in my opinion.
I would be described as a cessationist. I would not describe necessarily myself as a cessationist.
Okay, gotcha.
And the other point, if I may make, and this is just me, again, this is your faith is heralded throughout the world, whether it's the entire world, whether it's just the Mediterranean. Again, this is an important distinction. The New Testament, as we know it, did not exist. People know this orally. It is passed on. And what is passed on in terms of its specificity? Again, a verb translation, liturgical. How is that fleshed out? And I mean, I'm not talking to a novice, at least I know with Steve, in terms of like biblical interpretation, in terms of translations and things like that. Words, they have meaning, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So again, this wasn't a book or a pamphlet that was universally passed around. The primary means that people knew about the faith, what it looked like, how profound it was orally.
And that goes back to the very beginning,
yes.
In the rabbinic traditions, all the way back to the Pentateuch. Correct. If you guys don't mind, I want anything more to say about these verses, because I really want to get to verse 10.
That was good.
Specifically because of what Spurgeon's going to say about verse 10. So let's go there next. I said it before, let me read it again. Always in my prayers, asking that somehow by God's will, I may now at last succeed in coming to you. And man, we talk a lot about comfort and convenience. And in fact, let me do this. I saw this tweet this morning from our friend Megan Basham over at the Daily Wire.
I know what you're talking about.
And I responded to it. I want to share this tweet with the audience. She wrote, I'm really jealous of people who lived in an America where resilience and fortitude were still commonly held virtues. So few will know what they might have contributed to the world in an age that didn't valorize woundedness and trauma. It is, at its root, deeply narcissistic.
Yep.
And and her tweet reminded me of there's a Kevin Young and then there's a Kevin D. Young. Don't get the two confused, okay? A book I read many years ago by Kevin D. Young going after the emergent church. And he compared the emergent church, which was just, Steve, what's the emergent church? The 2006 version of woke. That's essentially what it was. The 2006 version of woke church. You see, these things it's the same scams over and over again. They just get rebooted, repackaged, renamed, rebranded. But at the heart, it's the same 4 or 5 heresies that were there at the dawn of the church. Okay? And Kevin DeYoung writes in that book about the emergent church, he said, basically, like I said last hour, Black Hole Sun is like the sonnet of our Gen X era. Okay. He said that the emergent church is like U2's anthem, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Okay. That you're, as long as you haven't found that which your heart needs the most, you're cool. You're edgy. You're relevant. But the minute you actually find it, well, no one's got any use for you now, and get out of here, bigot. That's essentially what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
That, or as we would put it, I'm just asking questions, guy. Okay, as long as I keep asking questions, I'm good. The minute I'm like, wait, I think these are the answers. What do you mean, you intolerant bigot? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that line from Kevin DeYoung from years ago in his book that I remembered reminded me of what Megan Basham wrote this morning. And in response to her, I tweeted back to her that paths of least resistance and non-confrontation are what we strive for now, not excellence nor honor. Even theologically, we have turned seeking the lost. So seeking the lost used to mean, okay, grimy places like Calcutta where I get my hands dirty, bread pantries, soup kitchens, visiting people who are, I got an email the other day from an old friend of mine I had not heard from in many, many years, and he was sharing with me his ordeal now, and he's working in ministry. But that's the end of the story. He spent many, many years with drugs and in and out of law enforcement and getting charged and everything else. Okay, and that's what seeking the lost used to mean. That it was. I mean, there's a reason why later in Romans, Paul's going to say, as you're reaching out to the unsaved, make sure you don't get any of their sin on you, because the presupposition is to reach them, you're going to have to go where the sinning is happening. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so the idea that you're just going to build these pottery barn edifices in the suburbs that are hosed down by antibacterial wipes every day, and people are going to be like, I'm here with my brokenness, as opposed to I'm here in my $40,000 SUV. That's the presupposition was it would be hard. The reason why Paul has to say later in this exact book of the Bible we're studying that we have to be careful not to get the sinfulness of the lost that we're trying to reach on us is because it would be hard to be that close to have Icarus fly that close to the sun and not get singed a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. That's not that this would be done in a safe, hermetically sealed environment. And now many of the churches we build are, frankly, a bigger threat to the zoning commission, which was kind of hoping that land could be rebranded commercial so they could tax it, than it is to the spirit of the age.
For sure.
And I want you guys to know, I texted my own pastor this morning after I posted this, because again, this is the kind of mood Isaiah puts you in. Because we're doing a building fund right now. The church we're at has grown to the seams. There isn't room. I mean, literally, it's a fire code. Literally. Okay. And we're doing a building fund right now. I love the plans for it, but I texted him this morning and I said, I'm going to tell you, I sent this tweet to him. And I said, I want you to know right now, I love you. But if you guys build that building and this is what you become, you're going to wish I never set foot in your church. That being said, I'm very confident that won't happen. So Amy and I will give generously to the fund. But see, because it's not the edifice that you built that is the reason why you are numb. It's that you built this edifice to remain numb. It's the other way around. Okay? It's not, the guy that I'm reading from here, I'm going to cite here in a minute, he had massive, what we would call today, mega churches for his era. Some of the largest churches in the history of London. The day of Pentecost, 3,000 men get saved, and that doesn't account for the women and children. That was the argument you and I had last week, right? Well, that would be, by our modern sense, a megachurch. A church of 3,000 people we would categorize as a megachurch in America. Megachurch is a mentality. It's not a population. It's not a structure. It's a mentality. Can I create this little oasis in the middle of these suburbs where everybody's happy? It's not a church, guys. It's like Wobegon with Bible verses. Everybody's happy, fine, and above average. Or will I have to get my hands dirty? Will I have to confront real suffering? And so when you look at what Spurgeon says here about verse 10, this plays right into so much of what we talk about on this show. He writes, Paul wanted to go to Rome, but I do not suppose that he ever thought that he would get there at the expense of the government with an imperial guard taking him there all the way. We pray and God gives us an answer to our petitions, but often in a way which we would have never dreamed. So, hey, yeah, you bet. And in fact, I've got a chauffeur service for you called Roman Centurions and House Arrest, yes. But here's the thing. Before you think that God did some monkey paw gimmick to Paul, all right, yeah, you can go to Rome under house arrest. Before that's what you think, listen to the rest of what Spurgeon points out. Listen to this. This is prophetic right here. Paul goes to Rome as a prisoner for Christ's sake. Now, listen, please listen to this, please. Now, suppose Paul had gone to Rome in any other capacity. Suppose Paul had gone to Rome in any other capacity. A nicer one, a more polite one, a freer one, because he is a citizen after all. He could have traveled to Rome, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so suppose he had done that in any other capacity. He would not have seen Caesar. He could not have obtained admission to Caesar's house. The prison of Palatine was just under the vast palace of the Caesars. And everybody in the house could come into the guard room and have a talk with Paul if they were minded so to do. Stop and think about this. This gave Paul the most influential ministerial platform on the planet. House arrest in Rome on the basically the same campus as the grounds where Caesar lived. Is there a more influential sector to preach from than the hub of power of the most powerful empire on this planet? Spurgeon goes on to say, I suppose that whatever I might be willing to pay, I could not have preached in the palace of the Queen, even in this nominally Christian country, but Paul was installed as essentially a royal chaplain over Caesar's household in the guard room of his prison. How wonderfully God works to accomplish his divine purposes. All Paul had to do to fulfill this incredible calling was be willing to be inconvenienced and suffer. We have a new Bible verse that we end the show with now. It's my favorite scripture from my favorite chapter of scripture, which we're probably going to get to in 2042. Okay? It's probably how long it'll take us to get to chapter 8 of Romans. But this is what it means. That a sovereign God has the ability to take all things, even the things we don't understand, that at the time made no sense to us. The story I told you the other day about these dear friends of ours, Noah's godparents, who are struggling to get their son to stop succumbing to his demons. And even though it went completely against their instincts to leave him in that jail cell, the fact they finally did that was the first step to putting him on the road of preaching the narrow road now, years later. What you meant for evil, God used for good, Joseph says to his brothers. This is what Romans 8:28 means. And yes, the things that Paul said there on Caesar's grounds as a de facto chaplain of his prison are what got his head cut off. But after that occurred, what were the next words Paul heard? Well done, good and faithful servant. And all it took was a little inconvenience and a little suffering. When my mom decided to have me at 15, she had no idea how that was going to work. There were many years it was very hard. You guys know my story. I've been unshy, not bashful about sharing it. 50 years later, my mom is 65 years old now. 50 years later, she would tell you she wouldn't trade it, though, for the world, seeing how it ended. The family she has, the grandchildren she has, the great-grandchild she just met a few weeks ago. Wouldn't change it for the world. But, man, I'm going to tell you, there were plenty of times, 1978, 1984, 1988, it wasn't easy. It wasn't. But look what a period of suffering and perseverance through it and endurance through it, look what it wrought. She has multiple generations now that will rise up and call her blessed. This is anathema to us. There must be an immediate solution, and it must be simple and easy. I can just vote for the magical politician, and so I don't have to do anything. I'll just vote for the guy who promises me I alone can solve. I'll just watch the network that rubs my belly and feeds my narrative, and I don't have to do anything. I get to download, vote the way they tell me, and just keep doing that. Cycle after cycle after cycle, and it's amazing. None of the institutions I'm taking part in are just now completely overrun by demons. How did that happen, right? Paul got his prayer answered. It required house imprisonment to Nero. That even under Roman tradition was considered a knuckle dragger. Even in Roman culture, parents weren't naming their kids after Nero, guys. They named him Julius, Augustus, not Nero. But his willingness to endure that is how God used that to give him the greatest ministerial platform on the earth. I'll stop now. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
This is so important. I just want to echo everything and put an exclamation point on it, because look at the context of everything you just said. For I long to see you, in verse 11, that I may share with you some spiritual gift, that you may be strengthened. Mm-hmm. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged. Strengthened and encouraged by what? What's the gift? Because let's face it, if you read this without the context you just shared, and you're from a seeker-friendly perspective, and a lot of the churches that are reading this are, oh, come here, let me give you a hug. How's the bake sale doing? All this stuff. The spiritual gift, even Paul didn't understand it at the time. It's martyrdom.
Yes.
It's pouring out everything.
He will even write in one of his other epistles, Philippians, my life has been poured out.
Yes.
Like a drink offering.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what this spiritual gift is.
Yeah.
Be not in any way confused about that. It is laying down one's life for a friend, the ultimate gift.
Or as he'll put it in chapter 12, when we eventually get there, probably about the time that Aaron's giving Abigail away to a marriage, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. This is what it means.
If Alfred helps you with this, fine. Endure. If your life is way too comfortable, if you just don't have to endure anything as a Christian, you need to find something that you have to endure.
If you took the average, or maybe we'll say this above average, and I'm not talking about in terms of holiness or spirituality, but I'm talking about the above average spiritual IQ of the normal Christian sitting in the pew or maybe arena chairs, theater chairs, depending on the church that you go to, of the average American church, meaning that they have head knowledge that's maybe above the average churchgoer. They know some orthodoxy. They know right and wrong. They know the actual gospel, but they're not really challenged. They're not struggling like Todd was just describing there. If you took that portrait that I just tried to draw, that individual, and you told that person, you are going to do an amazing work on behalf of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, in your lifetime. Because of your work, the gospel will be flourishing. Because of how God is working through you, more appropriately stated, the gospel has a chance to go to corners of this culture hitherto unknown in our 21st century mindset and outlook. That average person would probably say, yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a great adventure. And then they're told, but we don't know when that's happening. The manner in which this is going to take is public humiliation. You're going to be chained to, let's say, a Secret Service member for the rest of your days. We don't know when this is going to happen, by the way. It's probably going to happen in the dead of the night. I don't know when it's going to happen. You're going to be humiliated publicly. The FBI is going to plant things on your computer. You're going to be framed for this. You're going to be framed for that. You're going to just suffer. You're going to suffer, but the word of God is going to continue because of how he works through you. What is that person going to say then? Oh, I didn't think that was part of the bargain here. I didn't think that was part of the bargain. Have you ever heard of the band Radiohead?
Yeah.
Radiohead. Have you ever heard their song No Surprises?
I don't. Doesn't sound familiar.
It's basically comfortably numb, but instead of injecting drugs, you're basically inhaling carbon monoxide.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's written and it sounds like a lullaby. You could be put to sleep by this song, and it's really all about heart that's full, but like a landfill, a job that slowly kills you. Bring down the government, they don't speak for us. And then I'll take the quiet life, a handshake of carbon monoxide, no alarms, no surprises. What a pretty house. What a pretty garden. No alarms, no surprises. I'm putting myself to sleep with carbon monoxide right now. That is the average American Christian's outlook.
Yes,
I would wager. Comfortably numb, but with carbon monoxide, which is going to kill you.
Let's leave it there. More in a moment. Hey, did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery here in the United States? They've got more than 10,000 different kinds of plants, over 2 million happy customers right here in America. They've got everything you could possibly want. Trees, palm trees, fruit trees, evergreens, houseplants, so much more. You might be thinking, but wait a minute, I don't have much of a yard. Maybe I don't have a yard at all. Well, if that's you, did you know you can grow lemon, avocado, olive, and fig trees inside your home, as well as a wide variety of houseplants as well? The experts at Fast Growing Trees, they curate thousands of species so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. You get their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee. They offer free plant consultation forever. They've got the best deals you're going to find online this spring, and now you can take an additional 15% off as well with the code DACE at checkout when you go to fastgrowingtrees.com. Take an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com. Their menu, despite the volume of options, is so simple, even my wife and I were able to utilize it. So, again, 15% off with the code DACE when you go to fastgrowingtrees.com. Well, earlier in the program, I had a Freudian slip when I referred to the Southern Baptist Poverty Law Center and then realized we're really about 15 minutes from that being the case on the current path that the Southern Baptist Convention is on. You may not be a Baptist. You may not be a Christian at all. You may even be irreligious, just someone who has, some right of center viewpoint of the world and history, and you're concerned about the future. If you're in any of those camps, you should be very concerned about what is occurring right now within the Southern Baptist Convention. And that's why we're here with William Wolfe. He's with the Center for Baptist Leadership, and he joins us now here on the show. William, it's good to have you with us, brother, here on The Blaze. How are you?
I'm great, Steve, and it's wonderful to be here with you. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, brother. In fact, let's start there. I made the case that regardless of what viewpoint you're coming from here theologically, you should be, if you're a non-communist, you should be very concerned about the direction of the Southern Baptist Convention. So why don't you quantify my claim? Is that accurate? And if so, give us some evidences.
I think that's absolutely accurate. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant Christian denomination in the United States of America. We have 47,000 churches, approximately 14 million members across the country. 6 of the 10 largest seminaries in the United States of America are Southern Baptist seminaries. The vast majority of future pastors are being trained at Southern Baptist seminaries. And so it has a profound impact on the cultural and the Christian character of our country. And people should be concerned about the direction we're headed, because the progressive left recognizes just how strategic the Southern Baptist Convention is in holding back the darkness and holding back the communism and holding back the demonic attacks on our freedoms here in the United States of America. So they've been targeting it. And what I'm trying to do with the Center for Baptist Leadership and other organizations that are like-minded is to wake up sleepy Southern Baptists to fight back.
How did you guys get here? So, you look like a younger guy, look like you're younger than me. You're only a generation or so removed. Your denomination's been here before. And then there were a group of leaders like the late, great Adrian Rogers, Paul Pressler, and others who basically went seminary to seminary. They went to congregation and basically purged all the libs out of leadership. Now, they were able to do that, something like that in the late 70s, early 80s. And there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth back then. I can't even imagine what trying to do that in this social media age would generate. But how is it that just a generation later, you guys are back on the same precipice of the post-counterculture era as a denomination that you were, 60 years ago? How did this happen again?
Yeah, well, Steve, the price of Christian faithfulness, of doctrinal and theological faithfulness, is constant vigilance. It's the responsibility of every generation to contend for the faith once for all delivered to the saints, to protect the gospel. And so we shouldn't be surprised that we do have to do this every generation. But how we got here, I think, is actually pretty simple to explain. The fight for the Southern Baptist Convention, the conservative resurgence of the late 70s and through the 80s and into the 90s, was fought over theological liberalism, questioning whether or not the Bible is true, whether or not the miracles of Jesus were valid, whether or not Jesus was resurrected from the dead. That was old school theological liberalism, and we did purge that. But then we went through sort of a peacetime, and I think people let their guards down. And then in the 2010s, a new form of liberalism came, not theological liberalism saying the Bible's not true, but cultural liberalism, really cultural Marxism sort of translated into the church with critical race theory, feminist ideology, radical LGBT ideology, Black Lives Matter movement, you name it. If the previous fight was over the inerrancy of Scripture, this fight is whether or not Scripture is sufficient to address these issues that are facing us in our culture today. And unfortunately, as people like Megan Basham have showed in her upcoming book, Shepherds for Sale, a lot of money was poured into the Southern Baptist Convention to move it in a progressive direction on these political issues. And so now we are realizing that we've been steered and led away from doctrinal and biblical faithfulness, and we need to rise up and fight against these cultural and political compromises, which will ultimately undermine our theology and the gospel. In
other words, because of the Reformation that went on in your denomination a generation ago, and the influence it then wielded culturally as a result of that, that puts you very much in the crosshairs of the spirit of the age, and you've been infiltrated. Is that what I hear you telling our audience?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we have been infiltrated, and intentionally so, with hundreds of thousands of dollars coming from Buddhist billionaires into our ethics and religious liberty, the official lobbying arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, the ERLC. We've had money from Facebook and Zuckerberg flowing into them as well. We've had radical climate activists being platformed on our seminary campuses. And then in 2019, with the influence of critical race theory and sort of the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, the Southern Baptist Convention passed a resolution saying that critical race theory could be an analytical tool. All this is clear signs of intentional ideological and theological subversion. And again, it's because we let our guard down, and quite frankly, Steve, because I believe that so many of our current generation of leaders are weak and they want to be loved by the world. They want to have op-eds at the New York Times. They want to have a seat at the table. And so they're willing to compromise on these issues so that they can be loved by those in positions of power in our nation.
For many years, as I started getting into this business or movement, whatever we're going to call it nowadays, I would find myself cringing. You mentioned the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the SBC, cringing at Dr. Russell Moore and some of his more niceties and pieties of genuflecting to the culture. But then I started thinking maybe that's just me. Yeah, maybe I'm a guy who's more direct, maybe a little harsher. Maybe he's not a bad dude. Maybe we're just not a good match of personalities. Kind of the last straw for me, and the one that broke the camel's back, is when I was working for the Ted Cruz presidential campaign in 2016. Russell Moore at the SBC convention only put out, now Ted's a Southern Baptist. He was I believe, him and Huckabee was still in the race. So him and another guy that I was supporting previously in another era. So the only two Southern Baptist candidates running for president, one of them finished second for the nomination, and the other one was polling second for the nomination at this time. Okay, and they're not one percenters, fringe candidates that no one knew, no one liked, and they're the only two Southern Baptist candidates in a field of like 20 candidates, and neither one of them got invited on to speak to the SBC on behalf of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and instead Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio did, and it's because they were open borders. And that's what he was essentially trying to force onto the Southern Baptist Convention. And that was kind of my moment. It's not just that I'm more, harsher maybe, and we're not just dealing with tone here. This is principally going in the wrong direction.
Well, that's a great example. It doesn't surprise me at all. I was living and working in Washington, D.C. during the 2016 election, and I would say that Rubio was really sort of the embodiment of the ERLC's preferred candidate, and so much of that had to do with immigration. The ERLC has been partnering with Soros-funded organizations like the Evangelical Immigration Table to advance what essentially boils down to open borders rhetoric wrapped in sort of a thin layer of Christianese about loving immigrants made in the image of God. Of course, immigrants and even illegal immigrants are made in the image of God, but being made in the image of God does not give them some sort of fundamental right to come to our country illegally, or that doesn't mean that we need to commit mass cultural suicide by having, millions and millions of illegal aliens and refugees coming here to America. And yet that's exactly what the ERLC has advocated for. So on immigrationism, open borders, and then again, critical race theory, feminism, radical LGBT ideology, these men who have been leading the Southern Baptist Convention have compromised and partnered with the spirit of the age.
So tell us about your group and what it wants to accomplish here, what it's trying to do.
Well, in some ways, I would say that we are trying to accomplish a second conservative resurgence, but I don't want to just be backwards looking. I want to be forward looking as well. We need to fight off the current liberal resurgence. And at the Center for Baptist Leadership, sort of one of our key contentions is that the root of all this compromise is a failure of courageous biblical leadership. We need men who know what time it is and who do not want a seat at the table and are not able to be sold for 30 pieces of of silver. So with the Center for Baptist Leadership, our mission is to cultivate a new generation of uncompromising biblical Baptist leaders to help recover the glory and the purpose of the Southern Baptist Convention for the sake of spreading the gospel, transforming the world through the mission of Jesus Christ, and also engaging in cultural and political issues. I'm sure you've seen Dune, and you know that in Dune, the idea that they want to tap on Arrakis is desert power. That's what Duke Leto wants to do. Well, I have this idea that Baptist power, activating Baptists, because we're such a big contingency, could actually help lead America back to a future where Christianity is respected, the culture is not insane, but that requires telling them to forsake progressive causes and to get out of the pews and get engaged in the culture, in politics, in tech, in the media, etc. And so we have this vision where a renewed and strengthened Southern Baptist Convention that is uncompromised could actually really help not only spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the most important thing, but help bring this nation back to some semblance of sanity and peace and prosperity for the 21st century.
Yeah, I saw, Todd, a meme you shared a few days ago. I posted it on my socials yesterday. Is the train meme that gets refitted many different times, but it's America would be better off. So the train starts off on the track slowly. America would be better off without all this religious influence. And then the next panel is the train is barreling down the track, going off the track, and it says pregnant men. Right. That's a little bit of what I hear William talking about there. William, where can people go to learn more about your organization? And especially if there's Southern Baptist here in the audience, I assume there's many that weren't even aware of you guys and they want to get involved. How can they do that?
Yeah, that's right. You can find us online at centerforbaptistleadership.org. Follow us on X at Baptist Leaders. We have a podcast now that's out, and actually you'd be very interested in it. We did a 2-episode deep dive on Russell Moore's exit from the ERLC in 2021, his leaked letters full of lies and the issues that they've continued to cause for us today. That was with a trustee from the ERLC. So centerforbaptistleadership.org. And the most important thing, if you're listening to this and you're a Southern Baptist, is make sure to come to our annual meeting this year, June 11th to 12th in Indianapolis, and come and vote to help change the direction of the Southern Baptist Convention and, Lord willing, the direction of this country.
All right, one more time. That's when? June 11th and 12th?
June 11th to 12th in Indianapolis, Indiana, America's heartland.
All right. Thank you, William, very much. Appreciate the work you guys are doing. Thanks for joining us here on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet. Brought to you by our friends over at Eden Pure. They're back with their famous Thunderstorm air purifier. It is their top-selling product because it quickly destroys the components that are actually causing that air in your home or your office or garage that think it needs freshened. No, it needs cleansed. So it gets rid of the odors, the molds, the mildews, the bacteria, even some of the viruses that are the reason for why you have those smells that you have. So whether it's trash cans, litter boxes, cigarette smoke, dirty diapers, sweaty hormonal teenagers that are going through 2-a-days in the dead of summer when it's 100 degrees, not that I have any personal experience with that. No matter what it is, it's got you covered. And you'll never have to swap out filters out of pocket or out of expense. It's filterless as well. And now you can save $200 on an Eden Pure Thunderstorm 3-pack for whole home protection. Get 3 units for under $200. You put one in your basement, bedroom, family room, garage, kitchen, whichever. Go to EdenPureDeals.com to take advantage of this offer. EdenPureDeals.com, but you got to use the discount code Steve3 when you do. EdenPureDeals.com, discount code Steve3 at EdenPureDeals.com. All right, gentlemen, 2-minute warning here. Final thoughts on the program or the interview we just did with William Wolfe or anything else we talked about here today?
Well, whatever differences we have as Catholics and Protestants in terms of leadership, it's clear that the devil views both the same in terms of how to make them, how to break them. He uses the same playbook. The themes I hear him talking about could be applied to Catholic leadership and to Catholic laity. Steve, we've lamented as nice as Des Moines Christian is in terms of a place to be that as a refuge. Mm-hmm. They're dealing with problems just like Dowling Catholic has because they've become bigger and more wealthy. And the leadership of the SBC is clearly dealing with a lot of the same seat at the table. So, I mean, it's not any different from the devil's perspective. He just picks us both off in the same way.
Aaron?
Indeed. And I hope someday we have a conversation about similar to what we're trying or what William and his organization is trying to accomplish, returning to kind of first things within the Southern Baptist Convention, having a resurgence, not only the way that they did many years ago, but for the future in bringing back what's actually lowercase o orthodoxy to not only their church pulpits, but also in the ERLC when they're reaching out to government and trying to insert themselves into policy debates. That needs to happen. I hope we're having a similar conversation with maybe the Pope someday, is that, hey, this could be good. Even if you're not a Catholic, this is this is a good direction to go. And you actually have some skin in the game, again, even if you're not a Catholic, based on the leadership of the Catholic Church and things of that nature. So I hope we're having that conversation someday as well. Even though I'm not a Catholic, I think it would be a very, very good thing.
Agreed. And because as you said, the same parameters of all the rationales to discuss this from an SBC perspective apply the other way too. By the way, I was looking more at their organization and I saw the one and only Oklahoma State Representative Dusty Devers is a member of this group. So we got to find out when their legislative session is over in Oklahoma and get him on for a long form evergreen interview here this spring or summer. Let's make that happen. All right. We're going to make the overtime happen for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll be back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on Blaze TV. Until then, Romans 8:28.